I still remember the smell of mothballs and disappointment that clung to my old sweater as I stood in front of the mirror, watching my reflection blur through tears I refused to shed. My name is Sarah, and for 16 years, I lived in the shadow of my younger sister Emma's supposed perfection. But this story isn't just about hand-me-downs and family photos. It's about the moment I discovered that sometimes the most beautiful pictures hide the ugliest truths. The morning of our annual family photo session started like any other day of systematic favoritism in the Henderson household. I woke up to the sound of my mother's voice cooing over Emma in the next room, praising her for simply existing while I had already been awake for an hour, quietly preparing for another day of being invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was the older sister, yet I felt like I was constantly chasing after Emma's shadow, trying to catch even a glimpse of the love that seemed to flow so effortlessly toward her. Mom had been planning this photo session for months, coordinating with photographers, booking the scenic location at Riverside Park, and most importantly, curating the perfect outfits for what she called our Christmas card masterpiece. I watched from my bedroom doorway as she laid out Emma's clothes with the precision of a museum curator, a brand new emerald green dress that complemented her eyes, matching accessories that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and shoes that still had the price tags attached. A detail that stung more than I wanted to admit. Then came my turn. Mom walked into my room with an expression I knew too well. The look of someone solving a problem they wished didn't exist. In her arms was a pile of clothes that looked like they had been retrieved from a time capsule buried in someone's backyard. The sweater was a faded burgundy with small holes near the hemline, the skirt was too short and belonged to a fashion era I couldn't identify, and the shoes were scuffed beyond repair. "These will work perfectly for you, honey," she said, not meeting my eyes. The word honey felt hollow, like she was reading from a script she'd forgotten she was supposed to believe in. I wanted to ask why Emma deserved new clothes while I was expected to wear items that looked like they belonged in a thrift store's reject pile, but the words died in my throat. I had learned long ago that questioning Mom's decisions only led to lectures about being ungrateful and dramatic. As I reluctantly put on the outfit, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and felt something inside me break a little more. The clothes hung on me awkwardly, making me look younger and somehow less significant than I already felt. This wasn't just about fabric and thread. It was about being told, without words, that I didn't deserve the same care and attention as my sister. It was about learning that love in our family came with conditions I could never seem to meet. The drive to Riverside Park was filled with Mom's excited chatter about how beautiful Emma looked, how the photographer would love working with such a photogenic family, and how these pictures would be treasured forever. I sat in the back seat, drowning in oversized fabric and the growing realization that I was being treated like an afterthought in my own family's story. Little did I know that this photo session would become the catalyst for uncovering a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my place in the Henderson family tree. The photography studio at Riverside Park was exactly what I expected. All soft lighting and carefully arranged backdrops designed to capture the essence of family happiness. Our photographer, Mrs. Martinez, greeted us with the kind of professional warmth that made everyone feel special, but I noticed how her eyes lingered on Emma with genuine admiration while barely registering my presence. It was a reaction I'd grown accustomed to, yet it still felt like a small paper cut each time. "What a beautiful family!" Mrs. Martinez exclaimed, immediately gravitating toward Emma like a moth to flame. "And this dress is absolutely stunning. It photographs beautifully with your coloring." She spent 10 minutes adjusting Emma's pose, praising her natural camera presence, and ensuring every detail was perfect. When she finally turned to me, her smile became more forced, professional rather than genuine. "And we'll just work with what we have here," she said, tugging at my ill-fitting sweater with barely concealed frustration. I stood there like a mannequin being dressed by someone who wished they were working with better materials. The contrast between Emma and me was stark. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, while I looked like I was wearing a costume from a community theater's storage closet. But what hurt most wasn't the embarrassment. It was watching Mom's face light up with pride when she looked at Emma, while her expression became carefully neutral when her gaze shifted to me. During the individual shots, I watched Emma work the camera with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. She knew exactly how to angle her head, when to smile, and how to make even the most mundane pose look effortless. The photographer's excitement was palpable. She had found her star, and everyone in the room knew it. Meanwhile, when it was my turn, I felt like I was fighting against the camera rather than working with it. Every pose felt awkward, every smile forced, and I could sense Mrs. Martinez's growing frustration with my inability to match Emma's natural charisma. "Maybe we should focus on the group shots," Mom suggested after my solo session, her voice carrying a note of disappointment that she probably thought was subtle. It wasn't. The group photos were even worse. I stood there in my shabby clothes, feeling like a dark cloud in what was supposed to be a sunny family portrait. Emma naturally gravitated toward the center of every shot, and I found myself being positioned on the edges, as if I was an optional element that could be cropped out if necessary. But it was during a break between shots that I overheard a conversation that would haunt me for years to come. Mom was talking to Mrs. Martinez in hushed tones, but their words carried in the small studio space. "I just don't understand why she can't be more like Emma," Mom was saying. "Emma is so naturally beautiful, so photogenic. Sarah, well, we work with what we have, I suppose. Maybe she'll grow into her looks eventually." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had always suspected that I was the less favored child, but hearing it spoken aloud by the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally was devastating. I pretended not to hear, but something inside me shifted permanently that day. The knowledge that my own mother saw me as a disappointment, as something to be tolerated rather than celebrated, planted a seed of resentment that would grow into something much larger and more dangerous. As we wrapped up the session, I watched Emma bask in the compliments and attention, completely unaware of the emotional earthquake happening just a few feet away. She was innocent in all of this. She didn't ask to be the favorite, didn't demand special treatment. But her very existence seemed to highlight everything I wasn't and could never be. The ride home was quiet, with Mom already planning how she would display the photos, discussing which ones would make the best Christmas cards, and wondering aloud if we should do another session soon because Emma photographed so beautifully. I stared out the window, wearing clothes that made me feel invisible, and began to understand that this family photo session was just a symptom of a much larger problem. The real issue wasn't the clothes or the photographer's preferences. It was the systematic way I had been taught to believe I was worth less than my sister. But what I didn't know yet was that this painful afternoon would eventually lead me to uncover a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our family's carefully constructed facade. The photos arrived 3 weeks later, professionally packaged in an elegant portfolio that Mom handled like it contained precious artifacts. She spread them across the dining room table with the reverence of someone unveiling a masterpiece, and I had to admit that Mrs. Martinez had done her job well. The images were technically perfect. The lighting was soft and flattering, the backgrounds were beautifully composed, and Emma looked absolutely radiant in every single shot. But looking at those photos was like staring at evidence of my own inadequacy. In every group shot, I appeared slightly out of place, like someone who had accidentally wandered into the wrong family's portrait session. My clothes looked even more shabby under the professional lighting, and my forced smile couldn't hide the sadness in my eyes. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to glow from within, her natural beauty enhanced by the emerald dress and professional styling. "These are absolutely perfect," Mom breathed, holding up a favorite shot, a group photo where Emma was prominently featured in the center while I was positioned awkwardly to the side. "We'll definitely use this one for the Christmas cards. And look at how beautiful Emma looks in this one. She's a natural model." She continued her praise for several minutes, completely ignoring the fact that I was also in these photos, also part of this family, also deserving of at least a passing compliment. I excused myself and retreated to my room, where I sat on my bed staring at the old sweater I had been forced to wear. The fabric felt rough against my fingertips, and I wondered why Mom had chosen this particular outfit for such an important day. It wasn't like we couldn't afford better clothes. Emma's dress had been expensive, and our house was filled with nice things. So why had I been relegated to wearing what looked like donations from a church rummage sale? Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I went to Mom's closet, where she kept old photo albums and memory boxes. If these clothes had significance, maybe there would be some explanation in her collection of family memorabilia. What I found instead was a dusty shoebox hidden behind winter coats, filled with photographs and documents that made my blood run cold. The photos were old, faded around the edges, and featured a young woman who looked exactly like me. She was wearing the same burgundy sweater, the same outdated skirt, and the same sad expression I had worn during our photo session. But what made me gasp was the handwriting on the back of one of the photos. Margaret, age 16, 1985. Margaret, my mother's sister who had died in a car accident when she was just 17. I dug deeper into the box and found more photos of Margaret, letters she had written to my mother, and medical documents that painted a picture of a young woman who had struggled with depression and feelings of inadequacy. The final item in the box was a letter from Margaret to my mother, dated just 2 weeks before her death. The words were written in a shaky hand, and they spoke of feeling unloved, unwanted, and constantly compared to others who seemed more beautiful and successful. The realization hit me like a freight train. The clothes I had been forced to wear weren't just random old garments. They were Margaret's clothes, carefully preserved by a mother who seemed to be trying to recreate her dead sister through me. The shabby sweater, the ill-fitting skirt, even the pose I had been coached into during the photo session. Everything was designed to make me a living memorial to the aunt I had never met. But the most disturbing discovery was a journal entry tucked between the photos, written in my mother's handwriting and dated just a few months after I was born. In it, she wrote about how much I looked like Margaret, how holding me brought back all the pain of losing her sister, and how she sometimes found it difficult to look at me without being reminded of her greatest failure, not being able to save Margaret from her depression. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. I wasn't being neglected because I was less worthy than Emma. I was being punished for looking like a ghost my mother couldn't bear to face. Emma, with her different features and sunny disposition, represented hope and a fresh start. I represented grief, guilt, and the painful reminder of a beloved sister who had slipped away despite my mother's best efforts to help her. I sat in Mom's closet for hours, holding Margaret's photos and trying to understand how a mother could transfer her unresolved grief onto her own daughter. The family photos we had taken weren't just about capturing memories. They were about my mother's twisted attempt to heal old wounds by using me as a replacement for the sister she had lost. But what she didn't realize was that in trying to honor Margaret's memory, she was slowly destroying my sense of self-worth and creating the very conditions that had led to Margaret's tragic end. Armed with the devastating knowledge of Margaret's existence and my role as her unwitting stand-in, I confronted Mom that evening after Emma had gone to bed. I found her in the kitchen, carefully selecting which photos to send to the printer for Christmas cards, all of them featuring Emma prominently while I appeared as little more than a shadow in the background. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, placing the shoebox on the kitchen counter between us. Her face went white when she saw it, and I watched 20 years of carefully constructed denial crumble in her eyes. "I found these in your closet. I know about Margaret. I know about the clothes, the photos, everything." She sat down heavily, her hands shaking as she reached for one of Margaret's photographs. "You weren't supposed to find those," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought I had hidden them well enough. For several minutes, we sat in silence while she gathered the courage to explain what I had already begun to understand. The truth, when it finally came, was somehow both better and worse than I had imagined. "Margaret was my baby sister," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "She was brilliant, beautiful, and so full of life when she was young. But as she got older, she became convinced that she wasn't good enough, that everyone around her was more talented, more attractive, more worthy of love. I tried everything to help her see how special she was, but nothing worked. She died believing she was a disappointment." Mom looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "When you were born and I saw how much you looked like her, I thought it was a gift. A chance to do things right this time. But instead of helping you feel confident and loved, I found myself recreating all the same patterns that had hurt Margaret. I dressed you in her clothes because I thought it would honor her memory, but I realize now that I was just projecting my own guilt and grief onto you." The explanation was heartbreaking, but it didn't excuse 16 years of emotional neglect. "So you decided to make me into Margaret's replacement?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "You gave Emma all the love and attention I deserved because she didn't remind you of your dead sister?" No, that's not. I mean, yes, but... Mom struggled to find words that could justify the unjustifiable. I thought if I could raise you to be strong and independent, if I didn't coddle you the way I did Margaret, you wouldn't develop the same insecurities that killed her. I thought I was protecting you. By making me feel worthless. I shot back. By forcing me to wear dead girls' clothes while Emma gets everything new and beautiful? By treating me like I'm some kind of penance you have to pay. The conversation went on for hours, with Mom explaining how her grief had twisted her perception of motherhood, how she had convinced herself that showing me less obvious affection would somehow make me stronger, more resilient than Margaret had been. She talked about the guilt she carried for not being able to save her sister, and how that guilt had poisoned her relationship with me from the very beginning. But the most shocking revelation came when I asked about Dad's role in all of this. He knows about Margaret, Mom admitted. He's tried to talk to me about it over the years, tried to make me see how unfairly I was treating you. But I convinced him that I knew what I was doing, that this was the best way to honor Margaret's memory while protecting you from her fate. I realized that my entire family had been living a lie, with Dad caught in the middle of Mom's psychological manipulation and Emma completely unaware of the dark undercurrents shaping our household dynamics. I wasn't just the unfavored daughter. I was the victim of a grief-stricken woman's misguided attempt to rewrite history. I need time to process this, I told Mom, gathering up Margaret's photos and documents. I need to understand who I am when I'm not being forced to be someone else's ghost. As I walked to my room that night, I passed Emma's door and could hear her humming happily while she organized her new clothes. She was innocent in all of this, but I couldn't help feeling a complex mix of love and resentment toward the sister who had unknowingly received the childhood that should have been mine. The hardest part was realizing that Mom's twisted logic had actually created the very conditions she had been trying to prevent. By treating me like Margaret, she had made me feel exactly the way Margaret had felt before she died. But I wasn't Margaret, and I wasn't going to let her tragic story become mine. The family photos might have captured a moment of dysfunction disguised as happiness, but they had also become the catalyst for finally understanding the truth about my place in this family. Now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge and whether it was possible to heal from 16 years of inherited grief. The weeks following my discovery transformed our household in ways I never could have anticipated. Mom began therapy, finally ready to confront the grief she had been carrying for over 20 years. Dad emerged from his passive role and started actively working to rebuild our relationship, apologizing for his silence and complicity in Mom's emotional manipulation. But the most surprising change came from Emma, who, once she learned the truth, became my fiercest ally in healing our fractured family. I always wondered why you seemed so sad, Emma told me one evening as we sat in my room, surrounded by Margaret's photos and my own childhood pictures. I thought maybe you just didn't like having your picture taken, but now I understand. Mom was making you invisible while putting me on a pedestal, and neither of us deserved that treatment. Emma's response to learning about Margaret was fascinating to watch. Instead of feeling guilty about the preferential treatment she had received, she channeled her energy into making sure I finally got the recognition I deserved. She convinced Mom to do another photo session, this time with me wearing beautiful brand new clothes that reflected my personality rather than a dead woman's wardrobe. The second photo session was a revelation. Wearing clothes that actually fit, that were chosen for me rather than forced upon me, I discovered that I could be just as photogenic as Emma. Mrs. Martinez, the same photographer who had struggled to work with me months earlier, was amazed by the transformation. "You look like a completely different person," she said, and she was right. I wasn't trying to be Margaret anymore. I was finally being Sarah. But the real breakthrough came when Mom decided to create a proper memorial for Margaret, separate from her attempts to recreate her through me. We found a beautiful shadow box and filled it with Margaret's photos, letters, and personal items, creating a tribute that honored her memory without requiring me to carry the weight of her legacy. It was a healthy way to remember Margaret while allowing me to develop my own identity. The most powerful moment came when Mom finally showed me the family photos from our original session alongside the new ones. The difference was startling. In the old photos, I looked like I was apologizing for existing, while in the new ones, I radiated confidence and genuine happiness. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I made you feel like you had to be someone else to earn my love." Mom's apology was accompanied by concrete changes in how she treated me. She began asking about my interests, my dreams, my opinions on things that mattered to me. She bought me new clothes, not as an apology but as a way of showing that she saw me as an individual worthy of care and attention. Most importantly, she started praising my accomplishments and celebrating my unique qualities instead of constantly comparing me to an idealized version of Emma. The family photos we display now tell a different story. One of healing, growth, and genuine love rather than dysfunction disguised as normalcy. We kept one photo from the original session, not as a reminder of our lowest point but as evidence of how far we've come. In it, I'm wearing Margaret's old sweater, but now I understand that the sadness in my eyes wasn't my fault. It was the result of carrying someone else's pain. Margaret's story didn't have a happy ending, but mine does. I learned that I am not responsible for healing my mother's grief, that I don't have to earn love by being perfect, and that my worth isn't determined by how well I can replace someone else. The shabby clothes and forced smiles were never about me. They were about a mother's inability to process loss and a family's willingness to sacrifice one child's happiness for the illusion of honoring another's memory. Today, I'm 18 and preparing to leave for college. My room is filled with photos that show me as I really am. Not as Margaret's replacement, not as Emma's less successful sister, but as Sarah, a young woman with her own dreams, talents, and value. The family photos we take now capture genuine moments of connection and love, with everyone wearing clothes that reflect their personalities and everyone occupying equal space in the frame. The most beautiful part of this transformation is that it allowed Emma and me to develop a real relationship built on mutual respect rather than competition. She's not just the favored daughter anymore, and I'm not just the disappointment. We're sisters, each with our own strengths and challenges, each deserving of love and support. Sometimes I think about Margaret and wonder what might have happened if she had lived in a family that understood how to process grief in healthy ways. But I can't change her story. I can only make sure that mine ends differently. The family photos that once represented my deepest pain have become symbols of our capacity for growth, forgiveness, and genuine love. And that's a picture worth treasuring forever.